When I first moved to the United States, I had difficulty finding a job. I speak English well and have a university degree. I married an American stationed in my home country of Turkey. We met in Izmir, my hometown, and the home of a US Air Force base. But none of that helped me find work. After searching and hunting through all the job listings, I finally found night work listed on Craigslist that required no qualifications. That apparently was me in the USA. They needed office cleaners after business hours. I called the number, and they gave me an address and a time, and told me to bring a pair of rubber gloves. The boss would meet me and let me in, and when I was finished, I was to call him, and he would come and inspect and lock the building. While I was in the building, it was to remain locked, and no one was to be in the building without prior notice. It was explained that most jobs would be worked with a crew, and I would not be alone. However, on my first night, it would be only me. The boss said he had more work than people and was sorry about that, but he would have others with me in the future. This building wasn't so large in square feet, although it was 3 floors. I wasn't worried about what to do. I'm a Turkish woman, and I know how to clean well. It's in our nature. I wouldn't want to do this for a permanent job, but for part-time work, it would at least help with the bills. The boss locked me in, and I took the cleaning cart he supplied and began with the first floor toilets. I had a checklist to follow and exactly what cleaning products should be used. The instructions even gave me the floor layout and what direction I was to move to accomplish the cleaning as expediently as possible. When I was in the last stage, I was to call the boss, and he would arrive as I finished. He would be out supervising our other office buildings. If I needed any additional supplies, I was to call him. However, he told me that never happens. He meticulously ensures each cleaner has everything required to complete a job. The lights are off, and I turn them on during cleaning, and turn them off as I proceed through the offices. I cleaned, vacuumed, disinfected, and emptied waste baskets. When I completed the first floor, I took the elevator to the second. I had completed the second floor toilets, and was vacuuming clockwise as directed. I thought I heard the building elevator. I went to the corridor where I could see the elevator door and lights, and saw that indeed, the elevator had gone to the 3rd floor. I'm not a worrywart of any kind, but it was made clear that no one was to be in the building during my time there. If someone was to come in, I was to be informed, but for my safety and the safety of the building and the businesses it supported. I know they were concerned about the security of the businesses, and the waste baskets I emptied were to go into particular sealed trash bins, located inside a loading dock in the back. Since the elevator went up to the 3rd floor, where the bigwigs had their offices, I figured it must be one of them, and they don't call ahead. It also had to be someone with an access key because the door was locked. I decided I was not the building night security, just the maid, so I would not ask whomever if they had permission to be there. I went back to vacuuming, dusting, disinfecting, and emptying as my instructions required. I was cleaning an employee break room with vending machines and a small kitchenette when I heard a sound on the floor where I was working. I was a little apprehensive, and my nerves were twitching, but I kept telling myself that most fears were in our heads. Whoever is here probably just needs to finish his work before a morning meeting or something. I kept cleaning, and it was silent in the building except for my vacuum. But a few minutes passed, and I heard a banging and crashing sound like someone was throwing a chair against a wall. It was loud, even though it was all the way down the corridor. At this point, I decided to go down the corridor and check out what was going on. Surely there had to be a reasonable explanation for all the racket. The room was dark when I entered, and I saw nothing. The noise was much closer, and I said hello in the dark. Then, from the far corner of the room, a shadow darted into the corridor and into a stairway across from this room. I didn't see anyone, just the stairway door closing on its own with its door arm. I was sure that whoever this was, they were not supposed to be there. I opened the stairway door and stuck my head in to listen. It was silent. They had to be quick and either went up to the 3rd floor or down to the 1st. I yelled into the stairway. Nobody was supposed to be there. Leave now or I'm calling the police. 3 seconds later, the 1st floor door could be heard clicking closed. I brushed off my fear and sighed in relief that the nighttime visitor had left the building. I went back to my work, which was nearly completed on 2, so finishing that floor didn't take long. I took my cleaning cart in the elevator to the 3rd floor to clean. The layout was different than the first 2 floors, but on the time management schedule, It was to take about the same amount of time to complete. I got off the elevator and stood silently to listen to ensure it was empty of people, especially the nocturnal visitor from earlier. I would make a report to my boss that there had been someone in the building beside me. I was confident that he had left the building. I was sanitizing the toilet on 3. I had my earbuds in, listening to my favorite music, thinking this job wasn't so bad, when I was hit on the head from behind. I was knocked out cold, and when I came to, I was being dragged by my feet across the carpet through the dark 3rd floor corridor. I screamed and kicked my feet as hard as I could. I kept kicking until I apparently kicked him in the groin and he doubled over. I got up and ran for the elevator, but when I pushed the button, it didn't open, and I didn't have time to wait, as the intruder was already hands reach behind me. I ran to the stairwell, turning and pushing the metal door shut in his face. I heard him cuss and swear that he would catch me. I'm in good shape and sprinted down the stairs 3 at a time. He didn't follow, so I thought he was probably taking the elevator to cut me off on the 1st floor. I'm crying and running and so fearful he will be standing at the stair door. But he wasn't there, and I could see the elevator light was on, so he was still coming down in the elevator. Thankfully, the front door has those safety bars that allow exit even when the door is locked from the outside. I ran to my car and took off, dialing the police simultaneously. I went to an all-night diner not far away and waited for my boss. He and I went back to the building together in his truck, and when we arrived, the police were there, and my boss let them into the building with his key. About 20 minutes later, they came out with a dirty-looking man in handcuffs. How or when he entered the building, I don't know, but I'm glad they caught him. It was a chilling nightmare, and I shudder to think what he would have done to me if I hadn't regained consciousness when I did. When attending Indiana University in Terre Haute, I worked a night shift at a 24-hour gas station on Route 40 heading to Indianapolis. 40 is not so busy as Interstate 70 parallels it, and is much faster. My shift was usually from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. It doesn't interfere with my classes, and after midnight gives me time to study while working because there is usually very little traffic, especially on the Saturday shift. When I take over at 8, it's busy with many people heading to Indianapolis. They fill their tank and come in for a coffee or soft drink and snacks. We sell a lot of snacks. 2 aisles of chips, nuts, candies, donuts, you name it, we got it. About midnight, things have slowed down. Travelers still come in, but it is a more relaxed rush than 8 to 11. And after midnight, I have plenty of time to read my school assignments, play video games on my cell phone, and watch movies on my laptop. Most people who stop at the station just self-pump gas and maybe use the restroom. The night of my chilling nightmare, I played a video game on my cell phone sitting at the checkout. Route 40 was dead with no traffic. We were getting close to Christmas, and with the colder temperatures and earlier darkness, people just naturally stayed home. So after midnight, the night shift is as quiet as a tomb. I don't think a car drove down Route 40 but every 4 or 5 minutes, and maybe one car would come into the station every 15 minutes or so. Like I said, I was playing a game when a car's headlights pulled up to the outer pump. We have 5 rows of pumps. Number 5 is the furthest from the convenience store door. Usually people who go to the last pump in the middle of the night don't come into the store. So I was a little surprised when he walked in. It was a cold night, and he had his hood up on his jacket. He walked in, walked around the aisle to the back, and straight back out to his car, not using the restroom or buying anything at all, and returned to his car. He didn't look at me, and in fact kept his head turned at such an angle I was unable to see his face. He returned to his car, not to the pump handle but to the trunk, where he appeared to root around for something. He slammed the trunk lid closed and looked at me from behind his car. Despite the distance, I could tell he was watching me. The man was creeping me out big time, and I knew something was deadly wrong. I didn't know what to do. The danger was escalating at a rapid rate. My pulse rate was pounding. He came around his car with his hands in his pockets, and it appeared he had something in one of them. I don't know what it is, but my brain is running wild with the possibilities, and none of them were good. I raced from the counter to the front door and locked it. As the creep stood looking at me, he took his hand from the empty pocket and shook the door handle, trying to force it open. He was staring directly at me, and I could see his face clearly. Pure evil and anger in his eyes. His other hand remained in his pocket, and I was sure he had his hand on a knife. I shouted, "We're closed," pulling the blinds down and running for the back of the store. He started pounding on the glass with his free hand. I screamed from the back of the store, "I've called the police." I waited a few minutes before I dared to look out the window. The creep and his car were gone, but I wasn't sure if he really was or just moved off to the side out of view. A few minutes later, a police cruiser pulled into the station, and an officer approached the door. He said he would walk around and hang out until my shift ended, just 20 minutes off. I told the later shift what had occurred and that he should be careful. The officer said he would check every so often for the rest of the night just to be safe. On my drive home, I was shaking the entire way and afraid to get out of my car to walk to my front door. This creep has made me paranoid, and I will need time to recover from this experience. I still don't know what could have happened to me on that night shift. In the summer between my sophomore and junior year of college, I worked a night shift at a gas station/convenience store. It was the only work available in my small hometown for summer money. I wanted to be close to family this summer because there were several significant family events planned that I wanted to be a part of. Being a cashier on the weekday night shift allowed me to be with family on the weekends, and besides, it was a temporary summer job, not my career. But for now, it was easy money. The overnight hours were relatively quiet, especially in a small town. Most of the customers come in from off the highway. They were typical travelers. They stopped for gas, used the restrooms, and got a coffee. The station was at the exit ramp from the highway, but still a little way out of town. It felt like the middle of nowhere, even for a girl who grew up there. It got lonely most nights, but I stayed awake reading my school books, trying to get ahead in the fall classes. This story took place in late August. It was my last summer work week before returning to campus for the fall semester. I was very familiar with the job and comfortable working alone some nights. I arrived at 10 p.m. and got off at 6 a.m. It was never very busy during those hours. 10 to midnight would always be a rush, but from midnight until 5 it was a morgue. All in all, it was a pretty easy gig. It was past midnight when I saw an older sedan pull into the store. It drove past the pumps into a parking space on the side of the building that was not in my view. I could not see who was there because the store cameras faced the pumps in the front of the store. The side parking was for me and used for deliveries to come in the back. A man then walked into the shop. He was a laborer from his appearance. He wore bib overalls that were well worn out. On top of his head, a Carhartt hat pulled down tight over his longish hair that covered his face in a way I could not see his face. When he entered, he was looking in the other direction from the register towards the coffee center, so I didn't get a look at him. He walked to the back of the store behind the soda racks near the coolers, where I couldn't see him on the interior camera because it was aimed at the register where I was. I figured he was going to use the restroom or wash his hands or something. Then another 2 cars pulled up to the pumps. One just got gas and drove off. The second one, a guy, came in, walked around and picked up some chips and dip, and a 6-pack of Pepsi from the cooler. He came to the register and was super friendly. It was nice to have a brief conversation with him. He wished me good night and said to stay safe and left. I returned to my book, and the next 2 hours passed with hardly anyone getting gas. The shop was dead silent, so I put on my headphones and blasted my music. I was dancing by myself to stay awake. I was bobbing at the register when from the corner of my eye, I saw a man sitting on the floor in the back. This sent a shockwave through my body as I realized the guy in the Carhartt hat was still in the store. I had completely forgotten about him. It had been several hours now, and he was still here and looking pretty much incoherent. The guy gave me the willies, and a shiver went up my spine. I was super nervous but walked to where I could see him, still out of his reach, and asked, "Can I help you?" I instantly regretted my decision to approach him. The man was as fast as you can imagine up on his feet. He screamed at me with terrible insanities and pushed over the bottle rack. He went from one display to the next in a rampage, throwing everything from the shelves and screaming the whole time. He stepped in my direction, and I took no chances and ran from the store. I retreated to my car and drove a short way off. From a safe distance, I called the police, and they arrived quickly. I stayed in my car until the police had the man cuffed in the back of the police car. The man had destroyed just about everything in the store. After that deranged man ransacked it, it took several days before the store could be reopened. But for me, that chilling nightmare was the end of my summer night shift. I'm a security guard, and I've worked at many locations, but always with the same security company. I signed on with them shortly after my honorable discharge from military service. While many soldiers return to civilian life with tales of battlefield exploits, My military experience was spent in the United States in the more mundane day-to-day, as a guard at 2 different bases. I never saw action, but I did have some scary encounters, but none of them compared to my present position. One of my most bizarre and puzzling experiences was a couple of years ago. I was assigned to a company that required high security for their business. The entire facility was surrounded by security fencing and had a gated entry requiring a special pass. I was positioned in a gatehouse at the entrance, where I could check passes and operate the electric gate. During the overnight hours, I was required to validate all credentials with a phone call to a service center. On this night shift, I was working 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and all was quiet, with just a few regular workers coming and going, which was expected. But sometime after 2 a.m., a black Escalade pulled down the drive to the gate. I stood up from my desk by the sliding door, preparing to greet the car. I did not recognize the car as anyone who worked at the company, so I was curious who it would be coming at this time at night. If a special guest or service personnel was coming, I usually got a notice in advance to expect them and make it easier to clear them quickly. This Escalade, when it pulled up to the gate, had heavily tinted windows and rode higher with heavy suspension and tires. I slid the door open, gave a wave, and expected the window to open on the car. I couldn't see anyone inside. The windows were so deeply tinted, even with the security lights now directly on them. However, the car just sat there motionless. The driver's window never came down. I tapped the window with my knuckle and still nothing. Then the strangest thing happened. The lights dimmed, the security monitors flickered, and suddenly the gate electrically opened without my doing so. I had no clue how this was happening. I immediately went to radio the guards stationed inside. Something was happening, but the radio only gave static. As the Escalade drove into the facility, everything returned to normal. I glanced over at the monitors and hit playback. Everything was blank from the moment the Escalade entered the gate until its taillights were through the gate. Nothing recorded. The car went outside my sight line around the corner of the building. It wasn't 3 minutes before I heard screeching tires and saw the car blasting back to the now open gate that I could not close. It was jammed. The car was coming at a very high rate of speed and blew past me. The gate then closed on its own, and all communications returned online. No one had a clue what had just taken place. The entire incident was reported, but no executive ever explained to us what took place.